theyeshiva.net.
They tell a story about President Bush, who was visiting the land of Israel, and he was spending some time in the old city of Jerusalem, and one day he's walking down one of the ancient alleys in the old city, and he comes across this elderly man with a long white beard, holding a stick in his hand. And Mr. Bush approaches this elderly man and he asks him, "Excuse me, sir, are you Moses?" And this elderly man ignores him. So he asks him again, "Excuse me, sir, are you Moses?" But again, he gets ignored. So the president turns to his aide and he says, "You know, this guy standing here, either he's deaf or he's just really rude." And the old man, upon hearing this, turns to the aide and he says, "Actually, I am Moses, and no, I'm not deaf, and I'm not rude. It's just the last time I spoke to a bush, I spent the next 40 years wandering through the desert." But in all seriousness, they say the reason why Moshe Rabbeinu wandered the desert for 40 years is because real men never ask for directions. 2 weeks ago in Parshat Shlach, we learned about the story of the Meraglim, the spies, and how Moshe Rabbeinu tells the Jewish people that as a result of the sin of the Meraglim, you will spend 40 years wandering through the desert. And in the following parshas, Korach, Ukas, Balak, we learn about what these 40 years were like. The challenges, the trials, the tests, the failures, and the punishments that came with it. And we really have to understand, what was the point of spending 40 years in the desert? Was it simply a punishment? Was it an act of revenge by Hashem to get back at us for not believing in Him, not trusting Him that He could bring us into Eretz Yisrael? Or perhaps, is there some depth and some real significance and some real meaning to this journey of 40 years through the desert? There's a story that the Gemara tells us in Maseches Menachos, Daf Samachei Amar Aleph, about a debate that took place between Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai and the Baitusim. The debate was regarding the Yom Tov of Shavuos, and the Baitusim felt that the Yom Tov of Shavuos must always be on a Sunday. And the Chachamim, among them Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, said Shavuos could be any day of the week, doesn't make a difference. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai challenged the Baitusim to step forward and explain themselves and give their reason why they felt Shavuos must be on Sunday. And so the Gemara tells us, one elderly Baitusi came forward and he said, "I will tell you, I will explain to you why we think Shavuos has to be on Sunday." And he said, Moshe Rabbeinu was an Oyev Yisrael. Moshe Rabbeinu loved the Jewish people. And he knew that Shavuos is only one day. Unlike Pesach, which is 7 days, Sukkot is 8 days, Shavuos is only one day. And Moshe Rabbeinu knew that one day is not enough time to properly experience and enjoy a Yom Tov. If you want to get into it and feel it and find a Yom Tov meaningful, you have to have more than one day. So what did he do? Moshe decided that he's going to institute that the Yom Tov of Shavuos always be on Sunday, following Shabbos. And this way, when one goes from Shabbos straight to Shavuos, one has the feeling of a 2-day Yom Tov. It's as if he's spending 2 days on Shavuos, and that gives him enough time to get into it and enjoy it and find the Yom Tov really meaningful. This was the argument of the Baitusi and his reason why he felt Shavuos should be on Sunday. And to this, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai answered, "You're wrong. Your whole argument is based on the assumption that Moshe Rabbeinu was an Oyev Yisrael, and therefore he would look to help us out, and he would look to enhance our Yom Tov experience. But if Moshe Rabbeinu was an Oyev Yisrael, said Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, then why would he keep the Yidden in the Midbar for 40 years? Why would he have the Jews wander the desert for no reason for 40 years? We are told in Parshas Ba'aloischa that the Jewish people were 3 days away from entering Eretz Yisrael. They were right there. They were on the border of Eretz Yisrael. And at the last second, Moshe Rabbeinu tells them that we're not going in. We're spending the next 38 years, for a total of 40 years, wandering the desert. Why would Moshe do this? This was the question of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai to the Baitusi. And he used it as evidence. He used it as proof that Moshe Rabbeinu was clearly not a Noav Yisrael. Now, this story is obviously very strange. And the biggest question of all is, how could Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai accuse Moshe Rabbeinu of such a terrible crime? Moshe Rabbeinu was the leader of the Jewish people. He took care of them, he nurtured them, he taught them, he fed them. He was there for them. He was the perfect example of what a Jewish leader should be. And here Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai goes and accuses him of not being an Oyev Yisrael, of not loving the Jewish people. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, he was a tzaddik, a tana. How could he throw this accusation at Moshe Rabbeinu? And what is his proof? His proof is that if Moshe was an Oyev Yisrael, why would he keep them in the Midbar for 40 years? That wasn't Moshe Rabbeinu's doing. That wasn't Moshe's decision. That came from Hashem. That was a punishment. Because the Jewish people sinned in the story of the spies, Hashem said, for every day that the spies spent touring the land of Israel, you will spend 1 year wandering the desert. So, it wasn't Moshe Rabbeinu's doing. It was from God. And it was a punishment. So how is Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai using this as evidence that Moshe was not an Oyev Yisrael? This story is especially relevant now, as we stand a few days before Gimel Tammuz, and we remind ourselves, we focus on our Moshe Rabbeinu, our Rebbe, and his leadership, and his love of the Jewish people. And by understanding this story properly, and seeing the depth of what Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai really meant with his statement, we will gain new insight and a beautiful perspective into the unique leadership of Moshe Rabbeinu and his true love of the Jewish people. And I think it's very much relevant to our situation as well, as Hasidim and followers of the Rebbe. There's a lot of parallels between Moshe Rabbeinu and his way of leading, his way of loving the Jewish people, and our Rebbe as well, as we shall soon see. But let us begin by first understanding the argument of the Baitusi, and his claim that Shavuos should be on Sunday to give us an experience of a 2-day Yom Tov. What did he really mean? His argument at first glance seems actually pretty silly and trivial. But in truth, there is great depth to his argument, and a very profound philosophy lies behind what he was saying. What is the biggest achievement that man can attain in life? What is the highest state that man can reach in this world? Is it to be a taker or a creator? Is it to take that which God is giving us, or is it to give back, to contribute, to add? You see, God is perfect. God is truth itself. God is beautiful. God is unlimited. And so what God makes and what God creates is likewise perfect, beautiful, flawless. On the other hand, man has weaknesses. Man has limitations. And so what man creates, what man makes, is likewise limited, flawed, and not as beautiful. So there's a very strong case to be made for the ultimate objective in life is to be a taker. Because when one takes that which God is giving, when one receives directly from God, He has the ultimate. He has the truth. There's nothing higher and nothing beyond that. This is the best. On the other hand, when man is asked to give and contribute and add, what man can do is not going to be as beautiful and not going to be as perfect as what God does. So maybe the highest achievement in life is just to be a taker, to take that which God is giving and hold it and keep it. This was in fact the philosophy of the Baitusim. The Baitusim were a sect of Jewish people who denied the truth of Torah Shebaal Peh. They rejected the interpretations of the Chachamim to Torah and instead only accepted Torah Shebichsav. In fact, we are told that how did these Baitusim come to be? So there was, in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, a great tzaddik, a Jewish leader, and his name was Antignos Ish Soichai. He's mentioned in Pirkei Avos, Perek Aleph, Mishnah Gimel. And this Antignos Ish Soichai had two students. One who was named Tzadok, and the other was named Baitus. And one day, Antignos Ish Soichai came into his Beis Medrash, came into his yeshiva, and he taught his students his famous teaching, which is mentioned in Pirkei Avos as well, that one should not be like a servant who serves his master for the sake of receiving a reward. Rather, one should serve Hashem like a servant who serves his master not for the sake of receiving a reward. And we are told that Tzadok and Baitus heard this and said, that doesn't make sense. Can a person really be expected to serve Hashem and not want anything in return, not expect a reward? It's not possible. And so they said the only reason Antignos Ish Soichai would say this is because he really doesn't believe in reward. And because he doesn't believe in reward, he's lying to us and covering up by telling us not to expect one. And if Antignos really believed that there was a reward, he wouldn't tell us to serve Hashem without expecting one. And so upon coming to this conclusion, that there is no reward, they left the Beis Medrash, they went astray, and from them came these two families of Tzedukim and Baitusim. In other words, the Baitusim could not understand, couldn't come to terms with the fact that one should serve Hashem without expecting a reward. To them, the whole point is the reward. The serving of Hashem is only a means to an end, and the end is the reward. Why? Because the reward is that which God gives us. The reward is made by God, and He gives it to us, and therefore it is true, it is perfect, it is beautiful. It's the ultimate, it's the purpose. But man's serving of Hashem, what man is doing, that cannot be perfect. That cannot be beautiful. That has to be flawed. So what would be the point of saying serve Hashem and not expect a reward? It's missing the whole point. The whole point is to get the reward. This was their philosophy. Their philosophy was it's all about being a taker. Take from God, receive from God. The less man does, the better. The more man gets involved, the more he ruins, the more he spoils it. He gets in the way. Just let God give and you take. And that's perfection. That's truth. And this is why they rejected Torah Shebaal Peh. And they accepted only Torah Shebichsav. Torah Shebichsav is that part of Torah which comes directly from God. Man has no part in the creation of Torah Shebichsav. It was dictated to Moshe word by word from Hashem. Man cannot add or take away from it. It's purely from God. Torah Shebaal Peh, on the other hand, is that part of Torah which is processed through the minds of man. The Tanoim, the Amoraim, they had to question, answer, draw conclusions. They were mechadish. They came up with new halachas, new takanas, new decrees. This is the part of Torah where man has to get involved and contribute and add and create. And so to the Baitusim, this made no sense. Why would Hashem want such a Torah in which man gets involved? It only makes it worse. Torah has to be that which comes from Hashem directly, and man has no part in its creation. And so they accept the Torah Shebechsal and reject the Torah Shebal Peh. This was their philosophy. This is why they insisted Shavuot should be on Sunday. We are told that there is a difference between Shabbos and Yom Tov. Shabbos, the Kedusha, comes directly from Hashem. Hashem sanctifies Shabbos. But Yom Tov, we, the Jewish people, sanctify. We create the holiness. And this is why in the bracha of Kiddush that we say on Shabbos, we say, Baruch Atah Hashem Mekadesh HaShabbos. Hashem sanctifies Shabbos. But on Yom Tov we say, Baruch Atah Hashem Mekadesh Yisrael B'Hazmanim. We add the word Yisrael. Because us, the Jewish people, we are the ones to sanctify the Yom Tov. How is this? Shabbos is always the 7th day of the week. Hashem decided 6 days are weekdays, are mundane. The 7th day is holy. Man cannot create that holiness or take it away. It was set by God since creation, and that's the way it will always be. But Yom Tov is determined by the Jewish date. Pesach is the 15th day of Nisan. Sukkot, the 15th day of Tishrei. Setting the date, that was something that was given to the Jewish courts to decide. Based in has to determine when Rosh Chodesh is, when the month begins, and based on that, when the Yom Tov will be. So therefore it is us, the Jewish people, who actually sanctify the Yom Tov. By us deciding when Rosh Chodesh will be, that will cause Yom Tov to be when it will be, and so we bring about the Kedusha of the Yom Tov. So here we see again this conflict. The two sides of the coin. There is that which comes from God, the Kedusha, the sanctity which He gives us, and then there is the sanctity, the Kedusha that man has to create. To the Baitusim, it's all about Shabbos. Shabbos is the main thing. Because Shabbos is that Kedusha which comes from Hashem. Man doesn't create it. It's a gift from God. And so they felt Shabbos would be the perfect introduction to Shavuos. The perfect way to receive the Torah would be to come from Shabbos. Because to the Baitusim, Matan Torah was about receiving this gift of the Torah from Hashem. Hashem was giving us the Torah, the perfect truth, the perfect beautiful gift. We had to do nothing, just take it. And we would have this Kedusha, this sanctity from Hashem in the Torah. And so it made perfect sense to them to say, let's combine Shabbos and Shavuos. Let's combine Shabbos, the Kedusha which comes from Hashem, that man has no part in. That should be connected to Shavuos, which is Hashem giving us the Torah on His own, the one that He made, that man has no part in, and we just take it. This was the depth of the argument of the Baitusi and his logic. The Chachamim, however, understood that this is not what Hashem had in mind. When Hashem created the world and He put man into this world, He didn't put us here to be takers. He didn't want us just to receive that which He has given. He wanted man to be a creator, to contribute, to add, and to give. And so He gave us an imperfect world. And He said, here, you become my partner in perfecting the world. You help me create the world. Likewise with Torah. He didn't give us a perfect, ready-to-go Torah. He gave us the Torah and He said, you become my partners in creating the Torah. You help me develop it. Torah Shebal Peh. You can add. You can question. You can answer. You, together with me, we will build the Torah and make it what it should be. Now, why did Hashem do this? Why doesn't Hashem just give us everything ready to go from God? Why does He want us to work, and us to contribute, and us to give? This is because Hashem really loves us. And because Hashem really loves us, He wants what's best for us. He wants us to be able to achieve the highest possible levels. If man was only a taker, if all we did was take and receive from God, then all we would be is humans. Yes, we have what God is giving us, but at the end of the day, we remain humans. We remain limited. We remain weak. But when Hashem invites us to become His partner, and He says, you become a creator together with me, you give to creation, you give to the Torah, you build it together with me, then man transcends his identity as a human. He goes from being a human to being godly-like, to being a creator. He becomes almost an equal with Hashem. And so Hashem, in wanting the best for us, in wanting us to truly achieve the highest heights, He made us creators. He gave us something imperfect and said, here, you fix it, you perfect it, you complete it. And therefore, according to the Chachamim, the point of Matan Torah wasn't to receive the Torah from Hashem, just to get the gift. Matan Torah was really about Hashem empowering us and giving us this koyach to go out and give and contribute and create. And therefore, according to the Chachamim, Shavuos doesn't have to follow Shabbos. It should not follow Shabbos. Shavuos can be any day of the week. The real preparation for Shavuos is Sfiras HaOmer. We count the Omer. The counting of the Omer is the process of man refining himself, perfecting himself, working on himself, overcoming his challenges, overcoming his weaknesses. And with this we come to Matan Torah. Not with the Kedusha of Shabbos, which is given to us by Hashem. With our own avodah, our own accomplishments, our own effort. With that we come to receive the Torah. And we tell Hashem, yes, we accept the challenge, and we will become your partners. Similarly, when the Jewish people were in the desert, the following two choices faced Moshe Rabbeinu. Should he go with what comes from Hashem? Or should he push the Jewish people to work themselves? To overcome their own challenges, their own weaknesses? Why were the Jewish people in the Midbar in the first place? The Midbar was supposed to be the preparation for entering Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael is the Holy Land. Hashem's Shechina is there. And to enter Eretz Yisrael, one has to be worthy. One has to be ready. And coming from Mitzrayim, the Jewish people were not ready yet to jump into Eretz Yisrael. They had to be prepared. They had to go through a process of refinement to be able to go into Eretz Yisrael. And this was their time spent in the Midbar, in the desert. It was their preparation and refinement to finally be ready and worthy of entering Eretz Yisrael. But this refinement can happen in two ways. It can either be given by Hashem. Hashem can come down and on His own refine the Jewish people, perfect them, beautify them, purify them, and they're ready to go. Or this is something which they themselves can work on and put in the effort and push themselves to, on their own, become refined and become purified, and with own effort become ready to enter Eretz Yisrael. The Baitusim would have felt that the better approach is Hashem doing the refinement, Hashem doing the purification, because that refinement will be better, will be more perfect, more truthful. If we are left to our own devices, if we have to be the ones to refine ourselves, it's not going to be the same. It's not going to be as powerful as if Hashem does it for us. However, Moshe Rabbeinu felt that no. The best approach, the truest approach, and what God really wants is for us, the Jewish people, to do it ourselves. Not to rely on God to come down and solve all the problems and take care of everything. We should work on ourselves to perfect ourselves and refine ourselves. We have to put in the work. What's the difference if the refinement comes from Hashem or comes from within ourselves? How long it takes. When God is doing the refining, it takes very quick. It's a matter of a few days and it's done. We're perfect, we're pure, we're refined, we're ready. But if we have to refine ourselves and overcome our own challenges and weaknesses, that's going to take time. And that's going to be a very slow and painstaking process till we finally reach the level where we are ready to enter Eretz Yisrael. And so this was the answer of Moshe Rabbeinu, of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, by Tussi. He said, you, by Tussi, you think the ultimate is what comes from God. You think that's the true expression of love. That when God really loves us, He just gives us everything, without making us work for it. Therefore you think Shabbos is what it's all about. And Shabbos is the best preparation for Shavuos, for Matan Torah. And therefore, according to you, in the desert, the refinement should have come from God and taken only a few days. Your mistake is that you're understanding the love of Hashem and the love of Moshe Rabbeinu for the Jewish people on a very superficial level. In truth, the love that Hashem had for the Jewish people and that Moshe Rabbeinu had for the Jewish people is much deeper than that. They wanted us, like we said before, to transcend our identity as humans, to be godly-like, to be creator-like. And that comes through us with our own effort, with our own work, perfecting ourselves, giving and adding to creation, not relying on God. And therefore Moshe Rabbeinu kept us in the desert for 40 years. Because that's how long it took for the Jewish people to perfect themselves and refine themselves. And this is the ultimate. This is the point of creation. And this is why Shavuos does not have to be after Shabbos. It can be any day of the week. As long as we finish counting the Omer, that is the best preparation for receiving the Torah. So I think this gives us a beautiful new perspective into what the Jewish people were doing in the Midbar for 40 years. It wasn't a punishment. It wasn't an act of revenge. Hashem is getting back at us for sinning against it. On the contrary, it was an act of love. It was God telling us, I believe in you. You can do it yourselves. I'm not going to spoon feed you. I'm not going to give you everything. I'm going to expect you to do it yourselves. And you can do it yourselves. And that's what happened. It took time. There were failures along the way. There were many tests and challenges along the way. But in the end, it worked. And we succeeded. And before we entered Eretz Yisrael, Moshe Rabbeinu told us, that as you stand here today, you are Dveikim b'Hashem, you are attached to Hashem. You have succeeded on your own. And this was the unique leadership of Moshe Rabbeinu, the unique love of Moshe Rabbeinu. He wasn't the kind of leader who spoon-fed his people, who gave them everything. On the contrary, He enabled us on our own to bring out the best within ourselves. He enabled us to reach a lot further than otherwise we could have. Why? Because He loved us. The very first Farbrengen that the Rebbe had after he officially accepted the leadership of the Chabad movement, he said a sikha, he said a talk. And in that talk he said to the Chassidim, don't think that since now I have become your Rebbe, that now you can sit back and relax and I'll do everything for you. That's not the way it's going to work. He said, I'll help, I will guide, I will inspire, I will teach, but the work you are going to have to do on your own. Every single person is going to have to overcome their own challenges, their own weaknesses, and work to perfect themselves. It's not going to be a free ride. Likewise, on Chav Ches Nisan, Tavshin and Aleph, the Rebbe said his famous words, that I have done everything I can to bring Mashiach, and now I give it over to you, and you do whatever you can to bring Mashiach. This is the Rebbe empowering us and telling us, I believe in you. I know you can do it, but I can't do it for you. That's not the way it's supposed to be. For Mashiach to come, the Jewish people, every single person is going to have to take responsibility and make it his thing and do his part and put in the effort to make it happen. There's no free rides. We have to do the work, and we can do the work.
This class is brought to you by theyeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net/donate.